Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we are going to learn about the regulation of pressure by nervous system. To know about the regulation of blood pressure, we are going to the first slide. In this slide, we can see various elements. We are going to discuss each and every one number by number. Blood pressure is actually the pressure of blood against the wall of the blood vessels, and the blood pressure is regulated by the cardiovascular center. The cardiovascular center is represented over here by 4 nuclei. 1 nuclei that is present in the pons and 3 nuclei that are present in the medulla oblongata and some portion of the pons. I'm going to write them. Number 1, the acceleratory center. We can simply call it CAC. Number 2, cardio inhibitory center. We can simply call it CIC. And number 3, the vasomotor center. We can simply call it VMC. And number 4, the tractus solitarius. The combination of these 4 nuclei make what? The combination of these 4 nuclei make the cardiovascular center. I'm going to zoom it a little bit. So in this diagram we can see the 4 nuclei. This one is cardio inhibitory center. This one is cardio inhibitory center, which is present in the medulla oblongata. This is the cardio acceleratory center that is present in the medulla oblongata as well. This is the vasomotor center. This is present in the medulla oblongata, and some part of this nuclei is also present in the pons. We can see it easily. And this is the tractus solitarius. The tractus solitarius work as the sensory area of the cardiovascular center, and this is present in the pons region of the brain stem. So the combination of these 4 nuclei is called the cardiovascular center, and the combination of these 4 nuclei control or regulate the blood pressure. To regulate the blood pressure, the central nervous system get the signals or input signals from 4 distinct areas of the body. I'm going to discuss them one by one. Number 1, the baroreceptors. Number 2, the chemoreceptors. Number 3, the proprioceptors. Number 4, the limbic system. So first of all, the baroreceptors. Focus on this diagram. In this diagram we can see that this is heart, this is aorta, which arises as main artery from the left ventricle of the heart. This is the SA node, this is the AV node, this is the aortic arc. You can see over here that this is the left brachial artery, this is the common carotid artery, and this is the brachiocephalic artery, which give 2 branches over here, the right brachial artery and the common carotid artery, and it further gave 2 branches over here. Both of these are common carotid arteries, and both of these common carotid arteries give 2 branches over here, the internal common carotid artery and the external common carotid artery. I'm going to discuss them in detail. You can see over here on the ascending aorta and on the aortic arc, and over here the dilated portion of the internal common carotid artery, dilated portion is called carotid sinus. So on the carotid sinus, on the aortic arc and on the ascending aorta, you can see small dots, and these small dots represent the baroreceptors. What are the baroreceptors? Baroreceptors are the receptors which are pressure sensitive receptors. So it detects the high pressure or the low pressure against the wall of this aorta, or against the wall of this carotid sinus, and against the wall of ascending aorta over here. So you can see over here that this area is a bit dilated, and the wall of the carotid sinus is somewhat thin as compared to other part of the common carotid artery. So this area is very much sensitive to the pressure, to increased blood pressure or decreased blood pressure against the wall of this sinus. So this is very much sensitive to increased or decreased blood pressure. This area is sensitive to the increased blood pressure, and this is not as much sensitive to the decreased blood pressure. This is also somewhat sensitive to the decreased blood pressure, but this is highly sensitive to the increased blood pressure, just like this one. But this has nothing to do with the decreased blood pressure as compared to this one. This is not sensitive to decreased blood pressure. The baroreceptors over here are actually the nerve ending which are rich in the sodium channels. The nerve ending rich in sodium channels over here and over here and over here are actually working at the baroreceptor, because because those are the pressure sensitive receptors. So the second one over here, you can see the red color. These are the aortic bodies and the carotid bodies on which the chemoreceptors are present. The chemoreceptors are actually present on the aortic bodies or the carotid bodies. What are the carotid bodies and what are the aortic bodies? The bodies which are present on the aorta are called aortic bodies, and the bodies which are present on the carotid sinus are called the carotid bodies. The bodies, both of these bodies are sensitive to the chemicals. So because all of these bodies consist of chemoreceptors, so the chemoreceptors are present in the aortic bodies and the carotid bodies, and I have explained that the carotid bodies are present on the carotid sinus and the aortic bodies are present on the aorta. The carotid bodies and aortic bodies are few millimeter in size, and we can see them. These are visible on the aorta and the carotid sinus, and these are sensitive to a few chemicals which are present inside the blood, which consist of carbon dioxide, which consist of oxygen, which consist of hydrogen ion. So that is sensitive to the oxygen, carbon dioxide and pH. So the oxygen, carbon dioxide and pH sensitive receptors which are present in the carotid bodies are called chemoreceptors. So coming towards the baroreceptor, when the blood pressure is increased, what happens? The nerve ending which are present over here, the nerve ending which are present over here, and the nerve ending which are present over here, which are pressure sensitive and highly rich in the sodium channel. So when the blood pressure is increased, the pressure sensitive nerve ending are sensitized and the sodium channels are opened. When the sodium channels are opened, it creates the action potential, and that action potential are transferred towards the tractus solitarius, directly towards the brainstem or towards the tractus solitarius. So the increased blood pressure is detected by the nerve ending in the form of opening of the sodium channels, and that increased blood pressure is transferred in the form of action potential towards the tractus solitarius. Now the chemoreceptor. So when the oxygen level is decreased inside the blood, or when the carbon dioxide level is increased inside the blood, or when the hydrogen ions are increased inside the blood during the hypoxia, hypercapnia or a high pH, the chemoreceptors are activated over here and over here and over here. When the chemoreceptors are activated, that those chemoreceptors transfer the signal toward the tractus solitarius. So both of these, the baroreceptor and the chemoreceptor, transfer the signal toward the tractus solitarius. So if the signal is transferred from the carotid sinus, that is transferred by the glossopharyngeal nerve number 9. And if the signal is transferred from the aortic bodies, or from the baroreceptors on the aorta, so that is transferred with the help of nerve number 10, that is vagal nerve, towards the tractus solitarius. Number 3, the proprioceptor. The proprioceptors are present in the joints as well as in the muscles. Now what do the proprioceptors do in the body? The proprioceptors transfer the information. The proprioceptor give the information to the central nervous system about the position of the body. It also gives the information about the movement of the body. When a person is undergoing some exertion, if a person is undergoing some movements, some body movement, the joint move. The movement of the joints and the movement of the muscles and the joints both are used during movement of the body. So during the movement of the body, during the movement of the muscles or the movement of the joints, the proprioceptors transfer the signal to the central nervous system. As I have told you in one of my lectures regarding the somatosensory pathways, there was one pathway that was called posterior column medium lemniscus pathway. So the proprioceptor follows the posterior column medium lemniscus pathway, in which the first order neuron get the information from the proprioceptor toward the spinal cord. From the spinal cord it goes to the medulla oblongata, where two types of nucleus are there. I have not made over here. Those are the cuneate nucleus and the gracile nucleus. From the nuclei from the medulla oblongata, it goes towards the opposite thalamus. So from the thalamus it goes to the sensory cortex. From the sensory cortex it gave the information to the motor cortex. So this was the pathway from the proprioceptor towards the motor cortex. Now motor cortex will give the information. I will discuss it later. The fourth one was the limbic system, from where the limbic system get the information, and how the limbic system help in the regulation of the blood pressure. Actually, the limbic system get the information from all over the central nervous system, from all over the brain. It gave the information from the visual cortex, it get the information from the auditory cortex, it get the information from the somatosensory area, it get the information from the memory, it get the information from various location of the brain. And when the information require the increase of the blood pressure, so it then transferred the signal toward the cardiovascular center. I am going to discuss one by one in detail. So firstly, the baroreceptor and the chemoreceptor. The baroreceptor get the information from the blood vessel, from the stretch of the blood vessel. When the blood vessel is overstretched, it activate the nerve ending over here, and which transfer the signal toward the tractus solitarius. And the tractus solitarius do what? So the tractus solitarius will decide whether the blood pressure should be increased or decreased. When the tractus solitarius receive the information of high blood pressure, this tractus solitarius will decide to decrease the blood pressure. How will it decrease the blood pressure? This tractus solitarius will activate the cardioinhibitory center. The cardioinhibitory center is for inhibition of cardiac function, and the cardioacceleratory center is for activation or acceleration of cardiac function. So the tractus solitarius will activate the cardioinhibitory center, and it will inhibit the cardioacceleratory center. Going to this slide. In this slide we can see that the tractus solitarius gave the information towards the cardioinhibitory center. It activates the cardioinhibitory center. When it activates the cardioinhibitory center transfer the signal toward SA node and toward the AB node with the help of parasympathetic nervous system, with the help of parasympathetic neuron. So this is the parasympathetic branch of the neuron. This parasympathetic branch of neuron do what? This is actually the vagal nerve. This vagal nerve will transfer the information towards the SA node, and on the SA node there are M2 receptor. On the SA node there are what? There are M2 receptors. So these M2 receptor do what? The M2 receptor are activated by this signal. When it activates the M2 receptor, it increase the cholinergic transmission over here, and the cholinergic transmission decrease the activity of SA node, decrease the pacemaking of the SA node. Actually, the SA node is responsible for pacemaking. This is the pacemaker. So when the cardio-inhibitory center is activated, this transfer the signal toward the SA node, and on the SA node the M2 receptor, these are the cholinergic receptor, these are the G inhibitory receptor or G protein inhibitory receptor. So these inhibitory receptor will do what? These will decrease the signaling of the SA node, decrease the pacemaking of the SA node, and when it decrease the pacemaking of the SA node, it will transfer low signal toward the AB node. It will decrease the heart rate. So when the heart rate is decreased, the cardiac output will be decreased, and when the cardiac output will be decreased, the blood pressure will be decreased. So one of the mechanism is this one. The second mechanism is this one, that tractus solitarius transfer the information towards the it transferred the inhibitory information towards the cardio-acceleratory center. Actually, the tractus solitarius inhibit the cardio-acceleratory center. When it inhibit the cardio-acceleratory center, what will happen? This cardio-acceleratory center will transfer the inhibitory signal. This cardio-acceleratory center will decrease transmission towards the sympathetic tract. This is the sympathetic tract, which is over here on thoracic region. It transferred the signal towards the SA node and towards the AB node, and also towards the receptor on the myocardium. So when it transferred the information towards the SA node, on the SA node the beta 1 receptor are there, on the AB node the beta 1 receptor are there, and on the myocardium also the beta 1 receptors are there. So it decreased the signaling towards the beta 1 receptor over here, toward the beta 1 receptors over here, and towards the beta 1 receptor over here. So when the signaling are decreased signal is there from the cardiac acceleratory center, so the heart rate will be decreased. Actually, the heart rate has been increased due to the activation of these activation of these beta 1 receptor. So when the inhibitory signal come here from the tractus solitarius towards the cardiac acceleratory center, the cardiac acceleratory center is inhibited, so the cardiac acceleratory center is no more transferring the signal towards these receptors. And when this cardiac acceleratory center is not transferring the signaling, or transferring the negligible signals towards these beta 1 receptors, so the heart rate is decreased, and when the heart rate is decreased, the cardiac output is decreased, and when the cardiac output is decreased, the blood pressure is decreased eventually. Similar is the case with the carotid bodies or the chemoreceptor. When the chemoreceptor detect the high carbon dioxide level or high pH or decreased oxygen, then the blood pressure should be increased. The blood pressure should be increased to pump out all the carbon dioxide and to get more oxygen to that tissue. So what will happen? It will transfer the signal toward the tractus solitarius, and the tractus solitarius will do what? It will increase the blood pressure. How will the tractus solitarius increase the blood pressure? The tractus solitarius will inhibit the cardio-inhibitory center. This is the cardio-inhibitory center. So when the tractus solitarius inhibit the cardio-inhibitory center, it will no more transfer the signal toward the M2 receptor. So the inhibition will be decreased. The heart rate inhibition will be decreased. So the heart rate will be increased automatically. The pacemaking will be increased. The second pathway will be this one. It will activate the cardiac acceleratory center. When the cardiac acceleratory center is activated, it will enhance the signaling towards the this sympathetic root, and this sympathetic root will transfer the signal towards the beta 1 receptor on the SI node, on the AV node, and on the myocardium. So when the SI node is activated, then when the beta 1 receptor are activated on the SI node, AV node, and the myocardium, it will increase the cardiac heart rate. It will increase the heart rate by SI node activation, AV node activation, and it will increase the myocardium contraction. It will increase the cardiac contraction by the activation of beta 1 receptor on the myocardium. So the blood pressure will be increased, and so there will be increased blood supply. There will be increased oxygen level in the blood by increase of blood pressure. So what will happen if the blood pressure is decreased? So when the blood pressure is decreased, it sends the low blood pressure. When the low blood pressure is decreased, is detected by the nerve ending over here, this will transfer very low information, very low signal will be transferred towards the towards the tractus solitarius. When decreased signaling is there toward the tractus solitarius from here and from here, what this conceive the tractus solitarius is very wise in character. This conceive that the blood pressure is decreased. That's why I'm not getting high signaling from this area and from this area. So what will it do? It will increase the blood pressure by transferring the signal towards the cardio-acceleratory center. It will activate the cardio-acceleratory center, and it will inhibit the cardio-inhibitory center. So when it receive high signaling, it will when the tractus solitarius receive high signaling from the baroreceptor and chemoreceptor, what will it do? It will decrease the blood pressure by activating the inhibitory center and by inhibiting the acceleratory center. And when this tractus solitarius receive very low signal from these area, this will activate the cardio-acceleratory center and inhibit the cardio-inhibitory center. One thing more, you should learn that when the blood pressure is increased or decreased, this tractus solitarius also transfer the signal towards the vasomotor center. This is the vasomotor center. When, for example, the blood pressure is increased, what will it do? It will transfer the signal towards the vasomotor center, and when it transfers the signal toward the vasomotor center, the vasomotor center actually carry out a sympathetic pathway. The vasomotor center actually carry out the sympathetic pathway, so it will decrease its sympathetic signaling. This vasomotor center will decrease the sympathetic signaling towards the blood vessels. These are the blood vessels. This is the artery, and this is the vein in which wall is there. So it will do what? When the blood pressure is increased, it will pass very low signal towards the vein, and it will also pass very low signal towards the arteries and towards the alpha receptors on the arteries and vein. And when the alpha receptors are not activated because of the no signal from this area, from the vasomotor center, this will be the blood vessel. The veins and the arteries will be dilated, and when the veins and arteries are dilated, so it automatically decrease the blood pressure. Similarly, it will also not pass the signal towards the adrenal medulla. When the adrenal medulla is not activated, what will happen? The blood pressure will be decreased eventually, because the adrenal medulla is responsible for the production of epinephrine and norepinephrine. When the adrenal medulla is not activated, it will not secrete the epinephrine and norepinephrine, and when it not secrete the epinephrine and norepinephrine, what will happen? It will not activate the sympathetic nervous system. It will not transfer the epinephrine and norepinephrine toward the blood, and then epinephrine and norepinephrine will not go toward the SI node and AV node. That will not activate the heart. That will not increase the heart rate. So eventually the heart rate will be decreased. Eventually the blood pressure will be decreased. And if the blood pressure is decreased, when this tractus solitarius detect low blood pressure, this will transfer the signal towards the vasomotor center, and this vasomotor center will transfer the high sympathetic signaling towards these blood vessels and towards the adrenal medulla. And when it transfers the high signaling towards these blood vessels, what will happen? These blood vessels will be contracted. By the contraction of blood vessel and by the secretion of epinephrine from the adrenal medulla, the blood pressure will be increased automatically. Now going to this pathway, the proprioceptor pathway. When the proprioceptor detect the movement of the body, or when the proprioceptor detect the exercise of the body, what will happen? It will transfer the signal toward the posterior column medium lemniscus pathway, that will transfer the signal towards the medulla and toward the spinal cord, then to medulla, then to the thalamus, then to the sensory cortex, and then to the motor cortex, and from the motor cortex the motor information will be transferred towards the cardio-acceleratory center. This will be transferred to cardio-acceleratory center, and the cardio-acceleratory center will be activated. It will transfer the signals towards the SA node, AB node, and the myocardium, and it will increase the activity of beta 1 receptor over here, increase the heart rate and increase the contractility. So due to the exercise, due to the proprioceptor information, the heart rate will be increased and there will be increased blood pressure. It can also transfer the information. This motor area can also transfer the information toward the vasomotor center. When it transfer the information toward the vasomotor center, this will contract the blood vessel. This will initiate the secretion of epinephrine and norepinephrine from adrenal medulla, so the blood pressure will be increased. The next pathway is the limbic system pathway. From the limbic system, actually the limbic system get the information from various sensory areas, from special senses, and from various sensory areas of the body. This area is responsible for the control of emotions of the body. So when it get the information from various area of the body, and when this information is transferred towards the vasomotor center, this can also transfer the information toward the cardio-acceleratory center or cardio-inhibitory center directly. But over here I have mentioned that if this has detected, the limbic system has detected some emotion regarding the some emotional information from the eyes, or from the special senses, or from the various sensory areas of the brain. What will it do? It will transfer the information towards this towards the vasomotor center, and this vasomotor center will do what? It will transfer the information toward the blood vessel and toward the adrenal medulla, and that adrenal medulla will secrete the epinephrine or non-epinephrine that is transferred toward the heart, toward the lungs, and towards all the parts of the body, and it activates the sympathetic nervous system. It increase the heart rate, it increase the blood pressure, it increase the respiratory rate also. You can assume the function of the limbic system and the function of the brain, higher area of the brain, that when somebody is going to participate in the race, what will happen? Before starting the race, the heartbeat is increased. Before starting that activity, the heart rate is increased. Why before starting the activity the heart rate is increased? Because the emotion, this limbic system and this area, the motor area of the brain, has detected or has received the information from various sensory areas that this body is undergoing a heavy exercise. So it transferred the signal directly toward the limbic system, and the limbic system transferred the signal toward the vasomotor center or cardio-acceleratory center before undergoing exercise. Before undergoing activity, the heart rate is increased. You may have detected this, that before undergoing the activity, the heart rate is increased. Before starting the race, the heart rate is increased, because this information was given by the brain to the vasomotor center and the cardio-acceleratory center. This has not get the information. That has not got the information from the proprioceptor or the baroreceptor or from the chemoreceptor. This has got the information directly from the brain.